Hey, Cavs fans, German and Spencer Davies coming to you from Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, where the Cavaliers completed what was a blowout win over the Dallas Mavericks, 144-101. Plenty to talk about from this one because there was a number of records that were set by the franchise. But I think the overarching theme from today, Spence, obviously was how the looming effects of what is one of the biggest blockbuster trades in NBA history, I think it's fair to say. I mean, everybody was caught off guard by what went down overnight with the Luka Doncic trade to the LA Lakers involving Anthony Davis. They swapped stars with a couple other pieces involved, obviously. And I think it was pretty evident today, especially given that Jason Kidd was pretty swift in his pregame press conference to rule out like most of their usual starting lineup for this one on top of the players that they acquired in the deal. And that there was just kind of this malaise about the way that they played today. So that kind of leads and sets the stage for this blowout loss today for the Mavs. But man, like it was crazy to be here on this day, on a day where the Mavericks were in town, and sort of experience in real time how that team was dealing and kind of coping with the shock of all that, and obviously how the Cavs players, just kind of as bystanders of it all, were sort of taken aback by the entire thing as well.
Yeah, and Kenny Atkinson too. But
Yeah.
he also said that
he said it wasn't
really
surprising though, which is kind of a surprising answer, honestly, because most of us were like, "What the hell?"
That might have been the first time that he wasn't being transparent, trying to downplay everything and trying to prepare his guys for this.
I thought he was going to be more transparent than that. You're right about that.
But yeah, no, I mean, it was really weird to be here, especially like you're looking at from a media perspective, how much of the media from Dallas was in town, just taking a flight here, and one person scheduled their flight at 2 a.m. to come here and cover this event. And, the whole world's watching, and you're in there with a room full of, 25, 30 reporters. And it's pretty crazy for me too, because, I freelance. So I was doing it, and I was covering that trade as well as trying to cover this game. And I didn't even make it up to my seat tonight. It was pretty crazy. I was just kind of peeping up, seeing what was happening. At one point I looked up, it was 50-19 after one. Another point I looked up, it was 91 points after one half. And then I was like, oh, Sam Merrill hit 9 threes. So that, I think, is the summation of the day. But for me personally, like my mind and my world is spinning right now. And it has been, since about midnight last night.
Definitely a weird, I mean, from a career standpoint for us, like being here for that, kind of a cool thing, but also one of those things you'll never forget. Like, man, I was there the day, the fact that Cleveland kind of became like a secondary part of this story just because they were playing here today was kind of wild. And I guess that's a fun little sports trivia question for everybody for years to come is, where did the Luka Doncic trade go down? In some hotel in Cleveland, wherever the Mavs were staying last night. So that's kind of a fun little nugget there for you. But the ramifications of what that means for the Mavs, what that means for the NBA are yet to be determined. But I do think this kind of sets the stage, Spence, obviously, for the trade deadline week that is looming. And it's just a reminder that obviously anything can happen. Not to say that the Cavs are going to do anything, especially anything drastic. But I do think like this was kind of that reminder of like, you just never know in this league. And that's honestly what makes it so fun to cover is there's always something looming or lurking in the shadows that we don't necessarily know is coming.
Even if executives and coaches are transparent with you in that way, you never know what can happen. And I think that's just a prime example of what happened. And especially the way that Nico Harrison and Jason Kidd were talking before this game. It's just one of those things that you can't really predict. Especially for the relationships that Luka forged with that team and how often they were in contact and all that stuff. Like, you just never know. But, if you're just looking from our lens and being around, the team that we know and that we cover, it would be extremely shocking to even think that anything like of the sort would happen here in just this season in particular. But yeah, it's one that really catches you off guard.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, I think we were obviously there for the Nico Harrison and Jason Kidd press conference, and it was kind of awkward. I don't think that was handled very well by Mavs fans. I had a lot of Mavs fans like quote tweeting some of my tweets from that press conference, and they didn't seem too pleased. So I think there's still a lot of reconciling going on from that they have to kind of clarify, but that's obviously a Dallas problem. But yeah, just kind of an interesting day all around because of that as the backdrop. But that did, like I said, set the stage for what was a historic day for the Cavaliers. As you mentioned, several franchise records broken today, including the figures that you threw out there: 50 points in the first quarter, which is a franchise record for most points in any single quarter in Cavaliers history. 91 points in the first half, also a franchise record for a half. And then the 26 three-pointers made, also establishing a new franchise record for the Cavaliers. We looked it up beforehand. I think it was 25 against the Hawks during the second LeBron stint, one of those series that they had that mark. So and we'll get to it here in a second, but also an individual performance that gets worked into that stat specifically that was historic. But yeah, Spence, like a total domination from a Cavs team again against kind of like this hodgepodge Dallas Mavericks lineup. And it's one of those games where like they did what they were supposed to do, right? I mean, the starters were out of this game with 5 minutes to go in the third quarter. And it sometimes you hear about teams like playing down to opponents. Like that wasn't the case today. They understood what the Mavs were kind of going through, probably emotionally, but they didn't like let up because of that. They came out, they took care of business, and they walk out of here with a dominant win.
Another testament to the maturity of the team. How many times has Kenny told us that these guys know how to take care of business when it is that time? And Kenny said, like, these are another example of a time where you can let down. And when sometimes, these deals or, these games where maybe a lot of guys are sitting out or they're injured, you can let up because that's just human nature. But this team just comes out. They know when to take care of business, and they left no doubt whatsoever tonight. Evan Mobley, what an incredible game for him, and he's continuing to look more and more like himself as the games have passed by since coming back from that injury to his calf. Good for him. I think we're going to get to Sam Merrill, but Sam Merrill knocks down 9 threes, 27 points to tie a career high. It's 1 through however many guys that they play that night. And, Jalen Tyson's on that list. And, that Kenny Atkinson wanted to play Craig Porter Jr. and Imani Bates. Unfortunately, they were both sick going into today. So, but Karis LeVert's back. That's a huge, huge difference. The defense that he plays, the pressure he puts on, and then obviously he'll be getting his offensive flow back, and then hopefully find that jumper again because he's got that wrist injury on his shooting hand. So there's a lot of things that you can look at as a positive today in a 40-point win or whatever the hell it was.
I want to go back to Mobley for a second. The 22 points. He had 11 boards as well. Really did some nice things tonight. I know that the Miami game, I think he started to sort of look more like himself. And I thought today was another testament to like he's starting to get back to feeling like himself after the calf injury that he dealt with. I mean, to sort of quote like what the youngins would say these days, he understood the assignment, Spence, because he understood that this Mavs team was very undermanned. And Kyler Kelly, who was the center for this team, like he was attacking him. Like he went right at him. He was very aggressive. Some of the shots weren't falling. Like he could have had an even better night with some of the shots that he was taking. And so he was still a little bit off on like his mid-range game. And there were some layups that he just didn't make. And he missed, I think the dunk actually ended up being a foul call that he went to the line for that he missed. But yeah, like there were still some moments that he missed some shots, but it was his aggressiveness. It was the fact that he was kind of looking like himself again. And I think that's encouraging moving forward for obviously one of the star players on this team.
You want to see him in attack mode. And, that just kind of goes right back to the way that he's developed his offensive game this year. A lot of it's been Kenny, but a lot of it's also been himself. Yeah. And he's the one that's being the aggressor and doing it at all 3 levels, whether he's facing up, whether he's gotten better back to basket. He's also taking threes. The first time he's made a couple of threes in a game since coming back from the calf injury. We know that was something that he was really hitting his stride in the early parts of December. And then obviously the calf injury slowed him down, but hitting a couple tonight, wanted to be aggressive and make sure that he's getting those shots up from beyond the arc. And Kenny wants to see those attempts go back up to where they were. And hopefully he can just kind of rediscover that form that he had just about a month ago. So yeah, it's a good thing to see Evan doing that, and thought it was interesting. We don't want to keep going back to the trade, but one of the reasons that the Mavs made the deal for Anthony Davis was because they saw how big ball looks in Cleveland, and it's Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. And I think that is a testament to how this team's been built in the roster construction. And there's still obviously an incomplete grade to it. You got to see it work in the playoffs. You got to see how it goes. And the guys are cognizant of that. But in the now, that is a hell of an endorsement.
No,
I think.
I'm actually glad you brought this up because I should have brought it up when we were talking about the trade. Like the fact that the Cavs, in a short period of time since Kenny Atkinson got here, took over, and they got off to the tremendous start that they've had, and they're obviously sitting atop the Eastern Conference. For them to already be like talked about as like, we know this is a copycat league. Everyone's always trying to sort of figure out like, how can I be like the Warriors? How can I be like the Celtics? How can I? You're always kind of like pointing to different teams and saying like, how can we do that? It's interesting that the Cavs are kind of that example right now, where teams are pointing and saying like, oh, if they're doing that, why can't we do that? Like and how can we get to be that type of team? So I did think it was interesting. Like maybe it was just like ironic timing that they were playing the Cavs, and so it was an easy thing to point across the building and say like, well, look what those guys are doing. But I did think that was a curious thing that was brought up from Nico Harrison, just about like, hey, this is kind of what we're looking to do. And I do think the trade they made certainly points to being able to try to replicate that. But yeah, certainly a testament to what this Cavs organization has built for sure.
And his defense first, and Kenny's just kind of found a way to accentuate the strengths that they have instead of focusing on the weaknesses. Like everybody's talked about the wings and whatnot. The core four, he has gotten the best out of them, and he's certainly gotten the best out of his bench too.
A couple other things I'll just hit on quickly. Karis LeVert was back out there tonight after missing a series of games here. Good to see him back. I think he had a pretty solid night overall. He had the 10 points, 5 assists. He was plus 26 on the floor, which in a game like this, everyone was pretty much plus. There wasn't really anybody in the negative because you're blowing him out. But it was good to see him back out there and kind of had that effect on the team like he tends to coming off the bench, and a good sort of get right game for him. And I said that to you before you jumped on here. Like it did feel in a lot of ways like a get night right for a number of guys. Karis was part of that. Sam Merrill, who you mentioned, was part of that. He knocked down 9 threes, which we talked about, another record that was broken. I guess not broken, but he tied a franchise record for the most threes by an individual in a game. 9. Kyrie Irving did it. Darius Garland did it. And I'm missing one. CJ. I thought I was going to remember and I forgot.
Hey,
but
you're
anyway,
on this one. I'm trying to think of it too.
Fourth player to do that in franchise history. And he actually had a shot at trying
Kevin
to.
Love had to have done it, if I remember that Portland game correctly.
He wasn't on the list. He was not. On the list. I should have written it down. That's my bad. But anyway, but no, obviously a good night for him, and for a player that obviously he talked about after the game. Like he started the new year injured, missed a couple games. He was sick last week, and so he's had a hard time getting into rhythm. And we've talked about it like during games as we're watching this team play. Like something's just been off with Sam, and he hasn't been able to get that shot going. And as you talk about like playoffs and reducing the rotations a little bit and sort of shrinking those things, we were wondering if like he was going to have a place by the time the playoffs roll around in terms of getting minutes. If he's not knocking down the shots, like that's his job, coming to knock down threes. And so for him to get a performance like this tonight, the hope is that he can turn this into a stretch where he starts knocking them down and getting back into rhythm and kind of getting himself going again.
Yeah. And the thing is too, like, everyone's looking at the shot because that is what Sam is good at. We've seen it we saw it last season so much at how quick he gets that shot off and how well that he's able to come off of the pin downs and the screens and be a movement shooter. This season, though, he's been really focusing on the defensive end. And even if he won't admit it, I think that has also had to do with the stuff on the offensive end too, because if you're exerting that much energy defensively, you're taking a bunch more hits, not just trying to take charges. You are legit trying to stay in front of people. You are consistently in rotation and, running up and down the floor. I think that has an effect. And maybe he's rushing a little bit, the shot that is. And tonight, it looked pure. And hopefully that's something that stays with him, because defensively, as he said, he's not someone that usually gives himself credit because he is a perfectionist. He was like, I've done a lot this year.
Oh yeah, he downplayed the whole thing too. He was like, I didn't really realize the record was coming. My teammates were kind of telling me. He was like, it was a fun night, but I want to, I have bigger goals. He said they didn't really talk about it much after the game. I was like, man, like you're in the record books in Cavs history. Like have a smile, be happy about it for a second, like enjoy it. I was kind of like to use like the mentality like NFL players. They're always like, we're going to enjoy this one, and then tomorrow we're back to work. Like, take a night and enjoy it before you get started working on the Celtics who are coming to town on Tuesday.
True coach's dream. He wanted to talk about defense. Come on, that's why Kenny loves him.
Yeah, that's fair. I will say this. Speaking of 3-pointers, I think the moment I knew the game was, I knew the game was over pretty early, but the moment that I knew the game was like just out of hand, and it was like, okay, this one I can stop like intently having to watch, was when you saw Jared Allen starting to jack some threes in the third quarter before he was pulled.
Tristan
And then you had Tristan getting one up late in the game as well. So I think that was the telltale sign of like how today went. It was just total domination by the Cavs. You got their big guys coming out shooting some threes, having some fun, and you can do that when you're up like 40 to 50 points the entire game. So
most definitely. Hey, quick note too. Like I didn't know who Kyler Kelly was until it wasn't even today. It was until I went to the Lakers, South Bay Lakers versus the Cleveland Charge over at Public Hall. I want to say it was right after Christmas. And
who he is.
Kelly was playing for the South Bay Lakers. So there's another Laker connection here with the Mavs where he came over and started a game today. Congratulations to him. I think he got a double-double.
I think he did.
Like,
yeah.
good for him.
12 and 10 or something like that. Yeah.
That's something that you can put on your resume forever, even if you don't want to show the results. So that's a huge deal for him. Good for him. Saw Dante Exum back. That's really nice to see him too.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's some good stuff that comes out of the chaos of a trade, I think, sometimes in those little stories.
Yeah, that's a cool one. And good for him. And like I said, I think Evan Mobley, like I said, understood the assignment, definitely attacked him. But like you said, he got a double-double out of it. So it worked out in the end for him in some capacity. Celtics come to town next. They'll be here in this very building on Tuesday. We know what kind of weight that game carries. Win or lose, there's going to be a lot of overreacting to whatever the result may be. But it is going to be the latest test for the Cavaliers in their Eastern Conference dominance as they try to continue to prove like, hey, we're here to stay. And a key one too, Spence, because second to last game before the trade deadline. And again, as you talk about like barometers of deciding like, do we need to make a move? What do we want to do? The Celtics we know are a measuring stick with the defending champions of this league. And so because of that, like that game, I'm not saying it's going to sway Kobe Altman one way or another, but
yes,
it might. No. But I do think like if depending on how that game goes, like it might give you some sense of like, okay, do we need to add maybe another big? Do we need to make some ancillary move here? And so I think it comes at kind of an interesting time for the Cavs this week leading up to the deadline.
It does come up as an interesting time, and I hope that both teams are as close to 100% as they possibly can be. Unfortunately, the Cavs will not have Dean Wade, the Boston Celtic killer. So we will see how they respond to.
They're all like, "Whew, thank God."
I'm sure they are, man. Like we might joke about that, but Dean's got their number, and they do a good job of that. We know the last time that the Celtics were in town, Kenny really was switching. He was putting Darius Garland on Jason Tatum's, on his right side, and making sure that he was baiting Jason into these twos. They'll probably have their full cast of characters available, so I'm interested to see how the Cavs defend them. If this stretch of this week that they've defended, which has been terrific, great response after the 3-game losing streak, they've really battened down the hatches and have done a good job defensively, individually, and also as a team. I'm interested to see if that carries over against Boston now that they're doing that.
First time, like you said, they get their guys back. First time you're playing Kristaps Porzingis in that lineup this year, because the first 2 times they played, Kristaps did not play for them. And so that's an interesting sort of wrinkle in this as well.
Drew Holiday too.
Yeah, where it's like, okay, how are your bigs with Mobley and Allen going to defend this, obviously really great scoring threat that's in there for Boston. So yeah, a lot of different storylines to keep an eye on leading up to that one. Spence and I obviously have you covered on Tuesday night right here from the arena. In the meantime, I encourage you to head on over to the Cleveland Cavaliers on SI YouTube channel, where many of you are right now. Check out some of the post-game videos and reactions, some of it about the trade that happened, obviously, overnight. Kenny Atkinson's comments pregame about that, and also his post-game comments. You can also find the podcast, the Courtside with the Cavs on SI podcast that Spence and I do, and much, much more, along with plenty of stuff about the record-setting day that the Cavaliers had over at the Cleveland Cavaliers on SI or SI.com/NBA/Cavs. Appreciate you guys stopping on by. As always, we will talk to you real soon. Tuesday night, Boston Celtics in town. Until then, keep on following along with all things Cleveland Cavaliers, Cleveland Cavaliers on SI. It's cold.